Joined this evening by a very special guest, Rev Jackson. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. You're here in Toledo a second time in about the last 2 weeks, and you're pushing jobs again. What is the message you want to get out there about jobs these days?
Well, this is the Rust Belt. It's Marcia Capta's district. What an awesome congresswoman she is. It's where plants have closed, jobs have left, drugs and guns in, violence up, desperation up, because we've abandoned our cities. And now's the time for us to have a new industrial policy to reinvest in America, to rebuild America. We have a plan for Afghanistan, bring in $100 billion a year with 100,000 troops,
right,
and secure their democracy, grant them military security, and rebuild roads, bridges, sewers, jobs. Try that in Toledo. Try that in Detroit. So for us right now must be reindustrialization, put America back to work. The first focus was on salvaging the banks, the big banks up top.
Right.
They got bailout, but they did not reinvest in America. They did not link their bailout to saving homes and jobs. So now we need a stimulus too, I suppose, to reinvest bottom up.
Okay, so let me ask you, do you think Stimulus 1, the first one we had, worked?
If its mission was to salvage the other collapse of the banking community, it worked to that extent.
Okay.
On the other hand, the assumption was that once they got bailout, they would lend. As opposed to lending, they hoarded capital, put smaller banks out of business, and as a matter of fact, many of those banks were the predators on homeowners in the first place.
Okay.
But since they have something called PMI, private mortgage insurance, they have the insurance protection against foreclosures. They really made money off of the interest-free TARP money and money off of the insurance on foreclosed houses. So they really had no incentive to restructure loans and not repossess homes, and that is somewhat scandalous. So now people are in desperate straits. We're lost 8.5 million jobs in the last 18 months because of a big fault in our trade policy. 4.5 million homes a year in foreclosure, 20 million on the water. I lose my house to foreclosure, your house next door loses value.
Absolutely.
And when your house loses value, both of us lose the tax base. The tax base goes, we cannot fund police, teachers, firemen, librarians. And so in one sense, we're all in this thing together. We must in fact have a new industrial policy to rebuild and to reinvest in America. Okay,
if there was a second stimulus package, we have a new surge in Afghanistan. We've already gone through a first one. Is there money there to pay for a second one?
Well, there's unused money in the first stimulus that could be redeployed, number one. Secondly, it's questionable as to the wisdom of making a bigger commitment to Afghanistan when American cities are collapsing. In all these cities, we're losing jobs and houses, $100 billion a year in student loan debt, health care less affordable, and now credit card scams. So we have tremendous infrastructural crisis at home, and therefore the wisdom of going further abroad is a big question right now. But in the meantime, we must in fact stop these banksters from violating people taking their homes.
Banksters? Wow, that's a strong statement. Well, I mean, they may argue that you agreed to a loan, whether it had an adjustable rate or not. They followed through with that. You agreed to something, and now time to pay the piper.
Well, people often were deceived into these loans, for example. And you combine that with people getting to the loans and the rate goes up beyond their knowledge of and ability to pay. And then when these people begin to turn homes back in, toxic. The government bailed out the lender, but did not bail out the borrower. It bailed out the big bank, it didn't bail out the people. So banks got free money and charge a fee for free money. That's why I call it banksters. The government can borrow money at less than 1%, charge students 5 to 6%. So students are having to pay fee for free money. The government makes enough money off of student loan defaults to fund the Pell Grant. So banks are making money off of the low interest rate, 0% interest rate for houses and for students. They should be challenged, and we intend to do just that.
Okay, you spent quite a bit of time in Toledo here in the last couple of weeks. What are some of the things you have seen that can make this community grow, especially on the job front?
Well, people turning to each other, not on each other, because the reality is, if there ever were a time for black and white to find common ground, it's now. Because when they close your plant and the lights are out, we all look amazing and similar in the dark. So you may be some Cynthia, who's an African-American woman, trying to keep her and her child's home, or you may be Kim Jowers, a white woman. It doesn't really matter because the banksters have very little regard for them. It's about maximizing profit. And what the government did wrong was it did not properly oversee runaway banks. That is, if this week, if Detroit plays X team, without a referee, there'll just be fights. It'd be a brawl.
Right.
Referees make it a game of competition with their rules. So when the government did not do oversight, and when oversight collapsed, and they had runaway profits, runaway fee collecting schemes, didn't enforce fair lending laws, didn't enforce community reinvestment. So banks got all that they wanted. Now they don't want what they got because they ran the economy into a hole. But guess what? The government bailed out the bankers, but did not bail out the homeowners and other workers. So it's now time to look towards some forms of mass action. It's now time maybe for workers, homeowners to go back to the streets, demanding that they be heard because the inner circles are pro-banking.
Okay.
Inner circles are pro-Wall Street. They're not pro-Toledo. But if Toledo fights back, and if Erie fights back, and the Appalachia fights back, if Cleveland fights, Detroit fights back, we the people still have the power. Elections are coming up in 2010.
Yep.
Those who make the most sense to us to get our vote.
All right, Reverend Jesse Jackson, thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight. And that is your Talk Back.